Trustees to order. Please let the record show that 6 trustees are in attendance. I believe Mr. Schofield is going to be trying to join us via WebEx or some other form of technology at a later time. And this meeting has been duly called, and notice this meeting has been duly posted for time and manner required by law. In addition to the quorum, the board that is physically present this evening, Trustee Clay Schofield will be participating in tonight's meeting via video conference as allowed by Section 551.127 of the Texas Government Code. Mr. Schofield's participation via video conference will include his ability to see and hear the meeting, along with the ability of the trustees to see and hear him. The minutes for tonight's meeting will reflect Mr. Schofield's presence for all of the time he is able to participate fully via video conference. The minutes will reflect his absence during the portion of the meeting, if any, he is unable to fully participate via video conference. The first item on our agenda would be our board workshop, which is 2023-2024 budget workshop number 3. Mr. Calvin.
Yes, sir. Sorry, scheduling a pickup for my kid who's at the high school and panicking that mom's not there to pick him up yet. So, my apologies. Budget workshop number 3. All right, good afternoon, board. We are doing our third installment of the budget for next year, and it's been a really long journey. We started this back in February, and we kind of went through, we delayed May a little bit to June, thought we'd have a little bit more legislative input and directive on where we were going, and that didn't really come to fruition. So we're going off of where we are right now. So we made a last minute change based off of what the legislature did in the second special session. We do know that there's an anticipated special session to talk about school funding and school finance in the fall, but this doesn't take any of that into account. So if something comes with that, we'll come back later and we'll kind of update you on where we are with that and what that means for us. Quick agenda of where we're going to be. We're going to talk a little bit about current year, and then we're going to go through priorities for next year, some highlights, the actual budgets themselves as they've been drawn together. We'll talk a little bit about property valuations and tax rates. That's a important thing for us to talk about for the budget, but it's also part of our first rating that we have that conversation, and then next steps for the budget adoption. Current year, you may remember about a year ago, I was up here telling you I was a little bit concerned about the way our attendance was going, and we weren't hitting that 95%, and so we were going to take it a little bit more conservative for last year. So we did. We drew a budget that would take full demographic estimated enrollment at about 92.7% attendance, because that's what it was the previous year as we were kind of fully washing our hands of COVID and moving on from that. So that generated some significant variances in this year's budget. Overall, I anticipate about $4.6 million of additional state revenue for the year that we are currently in from where we originally budgeted. A lot of that was derived from special education, from CTE, and from our general conservatism as it related to overall ADA. So really, really important piece for us to get back on the right side of good. So there's a settle up that happens at the end of every year. TEA goes in and they look at what your current numbers that they have on file are versus what you actually had attend throughout the school year. So we submit them that information in June, and they match it up all summer long. There's a settle-up period that happens at the end of August and the beginning of September. Settle-up generally meaning the state owes you money because you did better than what they thought you were going to do, or you owe them money. Last couple of years, we had been in the we owe the state money category, which is not a good place to be. That really will do a number on your fund balance and on your budget as you go forward. So we took it extremely conservative this past year. We budgeted like a 200 student ADA increase because we had to get on the right side of the ledger. We had to get it to where TEA owes us money at the end of the year and not us owing them money. So in all honesty, we will have about 4.6 of additional state revenue, but I'm going to tell you that I think fund balance is going to go up about $3 million of that. We did have some additional expenditures this past year, a lot of them in support services. We've had a significant increase with inflation and with additional costs. So I think we're going to end up using about $1.5 million of that additional revenue that we're going to earn from the state. So all told, I'm looking for about a $3 million increase into fund balance. And again, that is generally due to a whole lot better numbers than we originally budgeted. The reason that you see mainstream, CTE, and early education on here is because those are weighted funds. Those are not just basic allotment. It's basic allotment plus a little bit extra for those categories. So those are really big drivers for the additional revenue that we're expected to receive from the state. Yes, sir.
Can you please explain to the board, just so for consistency, the cost avoidance measures that we're building into the budget rolling into this next school year relative to fund balance and what we anticipate adding in addition to this $3 million?
Absolutely. So fund balance has been a concern from the beginning. That was a priority identified by the board back at our February meeting and reaffirmed at our May meeting or June meeting. So our goal was we were hoping to break even. We were going to add about $700,000 for 23-24 to fund balance. Then we were going to add about $1.1 million in 24-5, and then $1.5 million in 25-6. All that to try to slowly build that fund balance back to the 25% that we believe is a good operating metric, and that TEA tells us as part of our first rating is a good place to be in fund balance. So on this screen, what you'll see is right now fund balance is about $24 million. With the anticipated increase of additional state revenue of $3 million for this year, that'll bring fund balance to about $27.1 million. The target number is about 27.9 or so million. So on a $109 million budget, which is where we are this year, you're looking at about 24.71% of expenditures in fund balance. So that deficit, that shortfall, Mr. Rogers, you were asking about at one point, what did I think our deficit was? And I told you about $1.5 to $2 million. It's a little bit closer to $3 million off the cuff. But this will put us pretty close to refilling that gap and getting our fund balance back to level, back to a good 25% of operating expenditures for the year. So as it parlays into going forward, it's still our plan to put $1 million into fund balance next year, 23-24 budgeted, because you're going to see that general fund expenditure budget increase significantly from about $109 million for 22-3 to about $119 million for 23-4. So we know that there still needs to be some additional fund balance that's going to need to be created as we move forward as a district. Why is fund balance such an important thing? So, rhetorically, to answer my own question, I guess. But anyway, why is it such an important thing? A, it is a good float. We do know that a lot of our budget comes from property tax collections. Those generally start coming in November, December, and January. They really taper off after about February in any given year. Hello,
we're going.
So it is a good float. We do get some money from the state before we get those property tax collections in November, and we get some more money from the state after property tax time. But I'm telling you right now, our average monthly expenditures are going to exceed the amount of money that we're getting from the state in September, October, and again in April and May and June. So that fund balance is a really important tool to make sure that we operationally can continue through those leaner months that are going to happen before property tax collections and then after collections have pretty much stopped for the year. Fund balance is also super important, as in this scenario we're in right now. We have approval from voters for a bunch of projects in Propositions A, B, and C, but we just sold those bonds and just got funded last Wednesday. So all that work that's been done in the interim, all those initial pay applications from architects and from contractors and all the campus improvement projects that are part of Proposition C that we've been doing, those have all been floated with fund balance to this point. So we will reimburse ourselves of those expenditures now that those bonds have been sold. So that will put money back on the operational side, but just that's kind of what that fund balance is there for. There's also one more mechanism that we don't hope to ever speak into existence, but if the state runs into a budget shortfall, one mechanism they can use to balance their budget is to kick that August school payment, the permanent school fund payment, to September 1. It doesn't sound like a bunch, but when they kick it from August 24th to September 1, it's a different fiscal year. It helps them balance their budget. But our staff still want to get paid on the 24th. So that's where that fund balance comes in to float that district waiting on that state payment. So anyway, those are your big uses and categories of fund balance. We can also use it for capital projects, whether we want to buy land or do significant improvements within existing structures in the district. But In a growing district such as ours, those are the significant reasons why we would be looking at that 25% of fund balance. So good work, y'all. We are in a pretty good spot at the end of 22-3 with our fund balance. Yes, sir.
Well, speaking of that, we're obviously in a lot better position than we were 2 or 3 months ago. We had no idea, and consider it a blessing that we had that windfall, if you will, come our way. Not trying to sound greedy, but at what will we be at that 25% by the time you're evaluated again?
On the first rating,
Yes.
preliminary first ratings just came out for the prior fiscal year. So the next round will come out next year, which will be off this year's audit. So yes, the next first rating will look pretty good because we'll be at that roughly 25%. It's our goal with these scheduled increases into fund balance, these scheduled dedicated increases, that we will keep it right around that 25% so that it does keep meeting that minimum from the state.
I want to go back to the specific amount of the $3 million in fund balance
Yes, sir.
proposing. I know you said that the majority of that funding came from CTE, SPED, and then also an increase in ADA,
Yes, sir.
correct? It's no secret that I've been a huge CTE fan since I've been put in this position. Is there a way to earmark some of that extra fund, some of those extra funds that were generated by CTE in fund balance specifically for CTE?
Absolutely. We can definitely look at it and come up with a little matrix, a little formula that will try to help quantify some amount of that additional funding. We can use, we call them assigned codes. So we can go into fund balance and kind of assign some money or earmark it for a specific purpose. And that way, you know, we could keep track of, you brought in more money than we anticipated, you know, here's your share of the additional funds, and then from there they can draw down on those. Absolutely. If that is the will of the board, we will do it.
I mean, and then I'm not just talking about CTE, it could be SPED or
Yes, sir.
whatever. What other program generated the additional revenue?
Okay, good question. We can work on a little something and we'll shoot it back your way and you know, just let us know we're on the right path and we'll come up with something for you.
And when do you anticipate making this move to putting this in?
I'm sorry.
In fund balance?
When will the settle up occur so we can
Yes.
actually put that money in?
Got you. You will get a budget amendment at the 28th meeting. So
Okay.
way long story to answer your question, only because I feel like being thorough at the moment. It must be the nerves kicking in. So we budget and we go all year, students attend, but then we don't really know what that number is going to be until June, and then it's time to clean it up, scrub it, make sure it's all good. By the time we get to summer resubmission, which is where we send all of our PEMS information to the state, generally the first part of July to mid-July, that's that resubmission window. So it's a little bit unfortunate that we don't really know that number until late June, early July, because it's really tough to go in and equate expenditures for things you want to do with the money that you've now earned that you didn't otherwise think you were going to earn. But we can go ahead and start working on that settle up. We can do the calculations now. TEA won't post that till likely somewhere between the 15th and the 25th of September. They'll do what they call, so right now all the near final, or the summary of finances that we get from them are preliminary. We'll start getting near finals.
So we got a couple of weeks to where we could work on that if that
Yes,
was-
sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was getting at.
Okay. I told you, I'm feeling long-winded at the moment. So just kind of a recap of what we've talked about so far. Priority one that was almost unanimously agreed to by trustees was to start replenishing that fund balance. So that was a priority as we work through next year's budget, as we work with Dr. Hollingsworth to identify the things that we're going to make sure that we're including in that budget. That dedicated fund balance plan was the first priority that we started with. And so we knew that that we were going to try to every mean necessary to put $1 million in fund balance And so you'll see that as we go through the actual budget adoption of the general fund, you will see a line at the bottom. Our revenues are budgeted to exceed our expenditures by $1 million. Talk a little bit about enrollment expectations. You'll get a demographic update tonight from Trent Smith with Zonda Demographics, but it's showing you the trend, and this is updated through the first quarter of 2023 report. That was the one most recent that I had. Tonight you'll get quarter 2 report. I don't expect that the 32-33 number to be a whole lot different than it is depicted here, but 11,145, that's kind of our target for this year. You may have heard Mr. Smith say it earlier, but we expect this to be a little bit of a lean year in terms of the growth. So we had a lot of inventory, a lot of home inventory in town. A lot of that got filled. And so there's not a whole lot of inventory right now. So builders are starting to ramp back up with their developments. So we do anticipate more houses towards the end of this year being ready for inventory, which will be more people moving in. But as of right now, it's a little bit lighter here in Waxahachie, and you'll see that tonight. He's got a slide to show you our annual closings, and we did take a little bit of a tumble from where we have been recently. So that's kind of the slowdown on that point, and that you'll see it pick right back up. You're looking at about 600 kids a year for every year over year going forward for about the next 10 years, which is what we would expect in a growing district. So this year we're going to budget about a 400 student increase in enrollment. That's about a 3.7% increase in estimated enrollment for ADA purposes. We're also budgeting a 400 student increase in ADA. So it is in line with our expected student increase, expected decrease in local revenues. So I anticipate, because of property tax compression, and we'll get into tax rates much further in this presentation, but we are going to compress that tax rate again. So tax rate's going to go down. So I do anticipate local revenues going down about 14%. It's going to generally be made up with additional revenues from the state. And so our state revenue, because we were lopsided, we were about 70-30 previously as we were doing these presentations last year, with local taxpayers making up about 70% of district funding and the state pitching in about 30%. That decrease in local revenues is kind of a smaller number, 14%, but that increase in state revenue is a significant percentage because they were moving from about 30% closer to, it's going to be about 50-50 next year in terms of local revenue and state revenue. Overall, the general fund is expected to increase about 9%, and that is a direct function of increased student enrollment in our district. And so that's where we're taking a little bit of a step back, a little bit of a pause on that student enrollment. We're trying to make sure that we get this pause in housing correct, but we do anticipate the general fund is still budgeted to grow next year a significant amount with our student enrollment the last couple of years. So we'll walk through some highlights for the 23-24 budget. One of our balanced scorecard goals is financial integrity. And so in focusing on this, we've realized some staffing efficiencies for 23-24s, primarily at the secondary level, by using a scheduling program called Cardonics. It goes through and it takes all of our students and their course selections, and it just evaluates, do you have enough sections of staff teaching this course or this subject? From there, it tells you where you may be overstaffed. It tells you where you may be understaffed, so that you can more tailor your hiring decisions for the positions of need, not necessarily where a previous staff member was employed. If that makes sense, we may not have, we may have an open history position or an open social studies position, but in looking at all the course selections, we may have to fill that as an English position instead. So that's the base of the program. Through the use of Cardonics, we were able to cost avoid approximately 16.5 positions, meaning we had 16.5 staff members who vacated a position, and we're looking at not refilling those positions and still maintaining class size expectations through this program, more efficient scheduling and optimization of our staff on hand. 16.5 positions, we create a budget savings of about $1.1 million, of which I'm telling you right now I've only budgeted about 87% of that. That's where that million's going to come in into fund balance. because I know it's unrealistic for us to fully have all 16 and a half of those. We are going to have some positions, some that could be at secondary, some even that could be at elementary, that we may need to add a staff position throughout the course of the year, especially as we see the enrollment from here. So 87% of that 1.1 is going to give you that $1 million increase into fund balance. So that's where that's coming from. Another one of our balanced scorecard of our 4 core values is honoring and supporting all the positive impact the lives of our students. So we are proposing a 2% salary increase for all of our staff. There are some positions, as Human Resources has gone through and looking at our corridor districts to make sure that we are in line with our peers, our Midlothian and Mansfield and Red Oak and Ennis 287 corridor peers, as we call them. And so some positions, some pay grades may see larger than a 2% increase to get them in line with the market of that core group of other districts. But every staff member should see a 2% increase off of their 22-23 salary for 23-24. We're also looking at moving our starting teacher pay to $54,600, which is very much in line with our peer districts from that same group. Kind of talk about some of the work that Human Resources did as it relates to honoring and supporting staff. They have looked at every single pay plan that we have and compared it with those peer groups that I was talking about, the Midlothian, Mansfield, Red Oak, and Ennis groups. Instructional pay plan and instructional support positions, we believe that those are in line with the market. We're sitting really good in that spot, in that group. We are recommending hard to fill and specialized positions increase to $16.50 an hour as a better tool to recruit and retrain position or people for those positions. One example might be a specialized one-on-one aide in the special populations group. Those are generally a little bit harder to fill and find and keep good employees. There is a proposed 2% increase for all that are on the instructional support plan. Auxiliary support, again, we're aligned pretty good with the 287 corridor. A lot of that plan saw a 9% increase for the 22-23 school year because that was getting us back in line with that group and back with the market. So for the 23-4, we're looking at about a 2%, we are looking at a 2% proposed increase for that group. Clerical support, we did have 2 pay grades that were a little bit out of alignment with the corridor. We had pay grades 3 and 4 that were a little bit low. So there are some targeted proposed increases for those jobs that are on pay grades 3 and 4, in addition to a proposed 2% increase to hope get them to that market, keep them aligned going forward with that 2% increase. As it relates to the administrative and professional pay plans, we felt pay grades 1 through 3 were pretty competitive with our surrounding districts. Pay grade 4, we saw some significant discrepancies with our coordinators. So there was about a $7,500 difference for some of our coordinators to the peers. So we made a new pay grade 6. We pulled them out of pay grade 4 and moved them to 6 to be more competitive with their peers. Pay grade 5, there was an adjustment for some staff on pay grade 5 to go to 197 days. They're pretty much at the median of their peers in that corridor. And then pay grades 7 through 11, slight adjustment for some of those positions within there to get to the market. But overall, no significant increases other than the 2% increase. There are a couple of title changes to remain competitive with others in the corridor, and that would be moving of some positions around some of those pay grades. One that we've talked about every time we talk is about teacher pay scale. So we've been looking at the UAE, the United Educators Association of the North Texas or DFW region. And last year we told you that we were a little low, especially at the early years on the teacher pay scale. So years 0, 5, and 10, we're a little bit lower. Our goal is to be around 23 to 28, somewhere in that top quartile of the districts that are surveyed for this UAE comparison. We are not one of the districts that is directly compared in the UAE comparison, but we can see where we would lie on there. As you can see, we tailored our pay increases for the beginning of the teacher pay scale for 22-23. And unfortunately, we didn't have the bang that we were looking for. It did not move the needle in terms of our ranking in those years as much as we would have hoped. So you can see a decrease in our standing in every single one of the years on that pay scale. So this is directly a function of making sure that we are appropriately staffed so that we are not utilizing additional resources and that we can turn around and put them into competitive salaries, because we know as a school district our function generally is going to be 80 to 85% directly tied to payroll. So just to look at a comparison of teacher salaries, you will see a giant cluster from our 287 group that's all banded together roughly at the $54,000 to $56,000 starting range, and then we all kind of move in unison up. We lose Midlothian a little bit once you get to about pay grade 13 or 13 years of experience, but for the most part, you see all of us kind of going in concert between Red Oak, Ennis, Midlothian, and Waxahachie. Mansfield is the clear and above leader in all of these. We do know that they tend to be a higher starting salary, and they tend to be a little more flat on those annual increases on the teacher scale. But they do lead that whole corridor as we look at each of the milestone years, 0, 10, 20, and 30. So this is one thing that while we're monitoring UAE to make sure that we're competitive within our region, we're also monitoring our 287 corridor districts to make sure that we're competitive more local to home. Waxahachie is the green one, so we do start a little bit lower on the starting pay, and we fall in line right with the mean and the average of our local 4 districts as we go through it. Talk a little bit about the proposed budgets for next year. Got way ahead of myself on the slides over here. Okay. Again, as we talked about with the property tax compression, I anticipate a significant reduction, about 12.5% decrease on just local revenues as a whole. So local revenue is going to make up about 53% of the budget for next year. It was a little bit closer to 70% in the year that we are finishing up. State revenue is going to increase to about 54% or 45% of the budget. That's roughly a 55% increase as a whole of general fund revenue. Federal revenue still budgeted at about $2 million. That's our SHARS program. That's a little bit on the conservative side. It was a little over $2 million this year, but that's not a budget leader as we go through making this budget. In all, general fund revenues budgeted to be $119.3 million, or about a 9% increase from where we are in the current fiscal year. Expenditures, salary and benefits, budgeted to exceed $100 million for the first time. That's about 85.88% of our budget, which is about a 7% increase from where it was last year. So the 101 compared to where we are now, it's about a 7% increase. Contracted services, the next biggest group, that's going to be your utilities and other services that we may have to contract for. About $6.7 million, supplies $4.7 million, other expenditures, travel costs, registrations, $3.8 million, capital outlay $1.4 million. So total expenditure budget of $118.3 million, which is about an 8% increase from our expenditure budget for the current year. The delta between those revenues and expenditures is that $1 million that we had talked about going into dedicated entry into fund balance.
I want to pause right there and just point out to the board and to the community, we praise a lot of the time the work that's being done in our business office, but I want to pause because there are so many of our fellow districts, not only throughout the Metroplex and North Texas, but throughout the state, that are adopting deficit budgets. And so the fact that that you all have maintained a conservative stance toward budgeting and through the great work of our business team led by Mr. Calden, we really find ourselves in a much different position than a lot of our peers. And so it's a real celebration.
Thanks, sir. And I mean, truly, to your point, we know that as a growing district, that fund balance is going to be really important for the next couple of years. We've got a bunch of buildings to move into, so this would not be the time to be doing a deficit budget. We can talk about that later if we're built out. We can talk about that if we're not opening new campuses, but this is not that point, and I'm off my soapbox and back to budget talk. Okay, debt service fund. You may remember this year that we were talking about. We had a planned increase to the INS fund balance this year because we were going to pay down some existing debt. Well, with the passage of these bonds in May, we kind of switched gears on you. It didn't seem overly financially reasonable to go in and pay down bonds that only had about 3 years worth of interest left, because think about it in your home mortgage. You pay a lot of that interest up front, and it's very little towards the end of that bond. So instead, we kind of transitioned our plan a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to pay down some of that new debt that we're issuing right now. We're going to go ahead and pay it off next year. And so we'll save taxpayers 29 years worth of interest instead of 3 years worth of interest. And so you are looking at a deficit fund balance or a deficit budget in the debt service fund for next year. But remember, that was part of a planned addition in 22-23, and now we're drawing against it in 23-24. So it's really good budgeting and planning on your part to let us keep that tax rate at the INS to go ahead and pay off some of that debt early. It turns out that that debt early was issued in May, and we're going to pay it off very, very soon. So there will be about a $4 million use of debt service fund balance next year as we go in and start saving taxpayers some interest costs over the next 29 years. Next fund is Child Nutrition Fund. Realistically, it's going to show you a little bit of a deficit, planned deficit in the Child Nutrition Fund. Know full well that the expenditures are almost always less than what we originate or think they're going to be on the front end, because they're tailored to the meals that our students are eating. So if our students are not eating the meals that we anticipate at the beginning of the year, our revenue won't be as much, but our food costs won't be as much either. If our students are eating more meals than we thought, then we'll be bringing in more money, whether it's from local charge for service or whether it's from reimbursement from the food nutrition program on the backside. So it does show a little bit of a deficit. Right now, the Child Nutrition Fund could handle a little bit of a revenue shortfall, but I wholly anticipate when we get going into the year, that'll balance itself out as we go, and the meals and the revenue that are generated from the meals will offset each other as we go. This is an increase of about $114,000 from our current budget for the Child Nutrition Fund. We do anticipate, as we have more students, we anticipate that we're going to have more students eating with us. And so a la carte meals are a significant revenue driver, so that's where students go in and they just get a Gatorade, or they just get a bag of chips, or a second entree of the meal for the day. So we do anticipate those to continue as our student population grows. It's about a 2% increase in revenue and expenditures for this fund for the 23-24 school year. So those would be on, I believe it's page 14 of the budget book that was distributed earlier in the week or last week. That should be a summary of the general fund, the debt service fund, and the Child Nutrition Fund as we would look for adoption of that budget. That'll be at the end of this month on the 28th. But we'll go over all those again as we do the budget adoption. We'll look at those at that budget book again at that point. So property tax valuations and tax rates. Again, this is one of the required discussions that we need to have every year for the first rating. It is a discussion that we have regarding the freeze-adjusted taxable values. With the built-in property tax compression. So we are looking at full disclosure on this. I did assume that the constitutional amendment would be approved by voters in November because it does change our revenue overall. So this is assuming a $100,000 homestead exemption. Our certified freeze-adjusted taxable values for 22-23 with the $100,000 homestead exemption is $7.7 billion. Last year it was $6.7 billion. So increase of about $950 million or 14%. If you go apples to apples and you look at it with the $40,000 homestead exemption, the increase in freeze-adjusted taxable values is $1.475 billion, or a little bit under 22%, which is a little bit closer to what you saw with your estimate of values from the appraisal district. But all in, all done, we are assuming that the increased homestead exemption of $100,000 will be approved, and that's kind of what we built this budget off of. It does make a difference when we get to running our templates and looking at taxable values from the state.
Brian, can you talk a little bit for the board about how that could impact us being a recapture district or not? I know we'd had some conversation about that.
Absolutely. So, really good point. Later tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about notice that we got from TEA that we could be subject to recapture for next year. There's 2 recapture amounts. There's Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 is off your basic. We are not at that level. This would only be the Tier 2. This would be the copper and golden pennies that we get additional funding on from the state. I know that we're going super Greek at this point, but let's talk about what it means. Your recapture is based off of your wealth per ADA. So as your taxable values increase with a flat ADA amount or number of students, you're going to pay more in recapture. As your property values decrease with a flat level of students, you may not be subject to recapture at all, or it'll be a much smaller recapture. In Waxahachie ISD, we have the benefit of a growing student population, and with this increase in the homestead exemption, the taxable values not going up near as much as they originally were going to. So we may actually skirt being a recapture district for 23-24. Depends on what our ADA number ends up being. And unfortunately, we're not going to know that until June. But right now, the state is estimating that we are going to be a recapture district. Their guess is $160,000. That would be our recapture payment. I'm telling you right now, without the $100,000 homestead, I'm telling you that number is going to be about $560,000, not $160,000. With the homestead exemption, right now, it's pretty close. It's really they're not odds that I would want to take to Vegas on whether or not we're going to owe anything on recapture at this point.
Well, and for our viewers, when we talk about recapture, that's commonly referred to as Robin Hood. And it surprises folks to hear, that Waxahachie be considered a property wealthy district. I have to remind folks it has nothing to do with the wealth of your families. It has to do with the property values in your community. And here, we don't have all rooftops. There are some communities that are all rooftops. We've got a really strong balance between rooftops and also industry,
Yes, sir.
right along 287 and 35.
Yes, sir. Good point. Thank you. So as we're looking at those freeze-adjusted taxable values, you may remember we talked a little bit about the maximum compressed rate. That's that automatic compression factor that the legislature has in state law. So we're allowed to keep 2.5% of revenue growth from property values year over year. Everything above that compresses our rate. But the other side of that coin is there's a floor to this. So you've got your maximum compressed rate in the state. 90% of that rate is your floor. Waxahachie ISD has been at the floor for about 3 years now. With the new compression from the special session, we're still going to be at the tax rate floor. So the compression was 10.7 cents, and we took all of that, and we're still at the floor. We are with 530-something other districts in the state at the MCR floor. So you got about half of your districts in the state that are at that tax rate floor at this point with the additional compression from the legislature. What does that mean? Okay, that means that our M&O rate proposed for next year, so this year's current M&O rate, a little over 94 cents, 94.29 cents. Next year, 75.75 cents on the M&O side. That's about an 18.5 cent decrease, or about 19.5% decrease in that M&O rate. On the INS side, our rate is currently $38.39. As a result of the passage of the bond propositions, that's going to go up 2.9 cents. So that rate will be 41.29. That is 2.9 cent increase and 7.5%. So offset those two, and you're looking at about a 15.5 cent decrease in the overall tax rate to our taxpayers, a little under a 12% decrease in the total tax rate. Total tax rate proposed for next year would be $1.1704. Currently, it's $1.3268. When tax rate compression started, we were at $1.5539. So it's come down almost 40 cents, about 35-ish, 37 cents, somewhere in that range. And I shouldn't guess and try to do that off my head because the very next slide shows you that trend. $1.5539 back in 1819, down to $1.1704 for 23-24. You just kind of see that stair-stepping as we go down with the various required compressions from the state. $1.1704, I don't honestly remember. I thought it was our lowest rate since maybe 99, 2000, somewhere in that range. There was one really weird year in there that rates were really low, and then they kind of went back up again. I was not in school business at that time, so I don't honestly remember. But it's been our lowest in a while. So next steps in adoption. We have notified TEA of our taxable values. They have done their MCR calculations with the additional compression required. And so they have given us a rate of 75.75 that we can start publishing and start talking about our proposed tax rate for next year. But because we got notice from TEA of excess revenue, we now have to wait until we take action later tonight to indicate our response to them on that before we can actually approve our tax rate. So we've traditionally been in the mode of doing budget and tax rate adoption at the very end of August. I'm telling you right now, I think we'll do tax rate in September. I don't see us getting the required approval from TEA, getting it published in the required amount of time to meet an August deadline, which is fine. That was self-imposed. There's no requirement that the tax rate go in August. The budget has to go before the fiscal year starts. The tax rate has to go before October 1. So I would anticipate we're going to do this in two different steps. We're going to do budget adoption on the 28th at 5, and then we're going to do the tax rate adoption in September, probably at the regular meeting. I anticipate we'll have all of our info, all of our approvals back by then. We'll have the ability to publish the notice of public hearing, and then we'll conduct all that in September. We do have 5 options to reduce our excess revenue. We can consolidate with another district. We can detach property, meaning we can de-annex, if you will, some of our property and send it to somebody else. I don't think 1, 2, or 5 are really going to be a conversation starter, if we're really honest with each other. But so that really leaves us 3 and 4. 3 is we can purchase attendance credits from TEA, which is code for we can refund the excess amount to TEA. Or 4, we can educate non-resident students. That's code for we can send another district some of our money, essentially to educate their kids. Number 5 is tax-based consolidation. This is essentially consolidate with another district, just we consolidate our tax base instead of the whole district. I don't honestly know. I'm not a scholar in this. I don't know anybody that's picked 1 or 5. 1, generally, when you consolidate with somebody, it's because TEA made you do it. It's not because it was your choice. I don't know of anyone that's detached property either, but again, this is not my field of study. I'm just the CFO, and I try to keep the books in balance. 3 and 4 are generally your most common methods for dealing with a recapture scenario. We do have to submit our option to TEA by September 1st, and then we get approval from the Commissioner of Education to go ahead and set our tax rate for next year. So again, that's kind of that timeline delay that we're not going to be doing it all in one fell swoop like we've done in past years. We'll have to break it up a little bit just from a timing perspective.
And the recommendation that you're bringing to the board tonight will be?
My recommendation would be option 3, to purchase the attendance credits from TEA. As we get going later, we may find another district that we want to send some money to, but I would imagine we're going to send it to TEA and they'll send it to that other district on our behalf. So
Historically, that's what we've done anyway, right? Historically, that's what we've done.
That's the one. So in the 10 years I've been here, we've been identified, I believe, 3 times as a recapture district, and we've never had to pay it. So because we're a little bit further from zero on the estimate on this one, I think we will have to. But yes, sir, that's always been the option we've selected, is option 3, to purchase the attendance credits. So public hearing, I don't know, to be really honest. I would borrow a phrase from my legal counsel that would tell me belts and suspenders. The public hearing, I'm not really sure if it's for the adoption of the budget or the tax rate, so we're going to have two public hearings. We're going to have a public hearing for the adoption of the budget, and a public hearing for the adoption of the tax rate. But the public hearing to adopt the budget will be at 5 p.m. on Monday, August 28th, right here in this room. At that time, after the public hearing, we'll go through amending the final budget for this year and then adopting the new budget for next year. And then, as a reminder, the budget takes effect on September 1, and that is definitely the wrong fiscal year, so I apologize for that. That should have said 23-24 fiscal year. But that's our next step. And then, again, in September, we'll talk about tax rate. So with that, that was a lot of information in 45 minutes. What questions do you have that I can try to answer?
Questions for Mr. Calden?
As we know, we have not received anything from the legislature. We are anticipating, hopefully, the October legislative session bringing money. The House is actually, the committee has said that we're going to have retroactive give the money. What are our plans for that money?
To be really honest with you, I don't know, because that is as far as the legislative process goes, the House has thrown out a number, the Senate has the chance to modify, amend, change, nothing pass altogether. We've been down that road through the entire legislative session this year. So right now, I don't honestly have a whole lot of plans until we start seeing that legislation move through the process, and then we can start talking about what strings were attached. Right now, current law says that 30% of new revenue has to go towards teacher salary increases. So that'd be number one on the docket, is we'd start looking at what our minimum requirement would be to give staff increases. From there, we'd see what other strings or what other attachments the legislature puts in there. We'd comply with those and then see what we have left and what would be the next critical needs in the district.
I guess my question is, since we're going to adopt the budget on August the 28th, they're coming in October, and maybe will give us some money.
Yes, ma'am.
Does it have to be appropriated?
Okay, sorry. Within the budget book that we talked about, there is a compensation plan. I believe it's page 33. And it does say that if the state gives us more money in the middle of the fiscal year, that you, the board, have already looked into that, and you're okay with us coming back and having a discussion about increasing the compensation to our staff in the middle of the fiscal year. So as long as it's part of our plan before we get into the fiscal year, my legal counsel tells me I'm okay with retroactively doing a pay increase. So yes, ma'am, Ms. Kriegel, it is part of the compensation plan. We may do, just to spell that out so that there is no concerns, we may actually bring that compensation plan as its own actionable item at that last meeting in August, so that we can all say, no, board knew it, took action on it, it's part of our plan, and if we get additional funds from the state, they've been in a roundabout way appropriated, but it's all part of your plan beforehand, so we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Ms. Kriegel, just to be clear too, for any viewers, that could be, it could be in the form of an additional one-time payment. It could be an adjustment to actual salary schedules, just depending on what it is that we get from the state. We just don't know. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
That's a
ma'am.
really good point. It went from a $10,000 increase to nothing and back and forth multiple times this year. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious about the discussion on funding on enrollment versus attendance. Is there, I haven't been following lately, so is that dead?
I don't think that one has a snowball's chance with our weather outside today, but, you know, maybe it gets revived. I doubt it. I truly, I'm not the one that keeps track of the legislature as they go through bills and all that fun stuff. I don't think that has any legs right now. I think all the focus, I think you're going to have House focus on basic allotment and how big of a pill do we have to swallow with vouchers. I think you're going to have the Senate 100% focused on vouchers or some sort of educational savings account. I just don't know where those two sides land. And so my guess is It's going to be a smaller than inflation-adjusted basic allotment and some form of vouchers. But I don't think that enrollment-based funding is gonna survive the day.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that will conclude our board workshop. At this time, the board will go into closed session according to section 551.001 et sec of the Texas Government Code. It is now 4:50. It is now 5:52. I will call the board back into open session. First item on our agenda will be our invocation led by Mr. McCutcheon, followed by our pledges by Annabelle and Charlotte Heimbuck of Dunaway Elementary. Mr. McCutcheon.
All right, let's pray. Lord, I want to thank you for this day. Thank you for all the people in this room that are committed to this district. As we start a new school year, I want you to just bless everyone involved, teachers, staff, students, and hopefully this will be a great year. Please guide us as we make decisions tonight and moving into the future. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Mr. Autry, I'm so sorry, you didn't actually say their names correctly. This is Sassy and Spicy. Come on, girlies, you ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, indivisible.
Good job, girls.
Our vision is to be a district where innovation thrives and growth is limitless.
We value choices because they make us unique and are critical to learning.
We value a collaborative culture that honors and supports all who positively impact the lives of our students.
We value an environment of belonging that respects individual differences and ensures equality for all.
We value relationships that broaden learning experiences and enrich our community.
Okay, next item on our agenda will be our recognitions. Ms. Bridges, I believe we have a few of those tonight.
We do. It just shows that WISD students never stop achieving because we have two that have made some great achievements over the summer. I am going to turn it over to Linda Solis.
Thank you, Ms. Bridges. Board of Trustees and Dr. Hollingsworth, it's always an honor and a privilege to spotlight one of our dual language students. And today we're going to recognize Luis Ortines. So Luis, if you'll come up here with me, please. He's now a 7th grade student at dual language at Howard Junior High. Luis first competed in our District B and won that one with 4th through 8th graders. And he competed at Region 10, and he also won the 4th through 8th grade there, which qualified him to participate in the National Spelling Bee in El Paso, Texas. And he did that in July 1st. And so there was contestants from California to Washington, D.C., all over the nation. And so he made it to the 15th round. So he was 15 out of 30 students that participated. So we're really proud of Luis and his accomplishments. I do want to give a special shout out to one of our dual language coordinators, Claudia Gutierrez, who was our WISD representative that went with them, and the family. Also a shout out to the Ortines family. The mom would be the coach as well. She coached him, and dad as well too, so they're a big supporter of him. So no más quiero decir a los padres que gracias por su entrenamiento en el apoyo con Luis. Okay? Y felicidades a Luis. So congratulations to Luis and his participation.
Board. Next, I'd like to invite Ashley Binnicker to come up.
Good evening, trustees and Dr. Hollingsworth. It is always a privilege to recognize our CTE students. You've seen Addison in this room before, and I guarantee you will see her again. Addison was in 8th grade at Findlay Junior High for the past year, and she is moving up to WHS this year. And over the summer, she competed at the state convention for FFA. She received 7th in state at the Senior Prepared Public Speaking Natural Resources category. Congratulations, Addison.
Thank you, Board and Dr. Hollingsworth.
Next item on our agenda will be our open forum. Not believe we have anyone signed up to speak tonight, so we will move into our reports. Under Superintendent's report, we report A. Dr. Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring to y'all my superintendent's report for this month. And I wanted to highlight, first of all, professional learning. And you see a lot of information on that screen. This is our professional learning for elementary teachers for August 3rd, August 4th, and August the 7th. And I want to just point out, and you'll see really just the breadth and the scope of the things that our folks were exposed to during those days. A tremendous amount of planning from Dr. Binnicker's team, our Teaching, Learning, and Innovation Department, Stacy Johnson, and so many others who worked really, really hard to ensure that we had great plans for our folks. But you'll see they range from behavior strategies. You'll see benchmark phonics, which was a huge hit. So much appreciation on the part of teachers for your commitment, board, to the acquisition of that benchmark phonics program. From writing habits to our panorama training, which is specifically geared toward how it is that we track students in our multi-tiered system of supports. Lots of really good training, and this is elementary. And the next page here, you'll see a very similar kind of schedule for our secondary core content folks. And I'm just showing y'all elementary and secondary core teachers. We had specialized training for special ed teachers. We had specialized training specific to our bilingual education teachers, and the list goes on. And so really, really proud of this work, and I wanted y'all to see the kind of training that our folks were getting over those first few days. The next thing I wanted to share is something that a lot of folks are very interested in, and that is, what are we going to call these facilities? Comprehensive High School number 2 does not fit well in a cheer, so you're going to have to come up with a better name than that. And so we will meet for the first time on Wednesday, August the 16th in the morning, and that committee, the Facilities Naming Committee, which is representative of our board, representative of our community. We have former board members. We have folks who've lived here their entire lives, and we have folks who have not lived here very long who are part of that particular committee. They're charged with coming up with recommendations for elementary number 10 and elementary number 11, and also for Comprehensive High School number 2. They will bring those recommendations to the school board. And ultimately, it is the 7 of you who will make a determination as to what we will name those campuses. I'll point out a couple of things. We have a really good local policy. It's board policy CW local that outlines how it is that we make these determinations for school names. And I'll also point out that because Comprehensive High School number 2 is going to be something that's going to encompass a large number of our kids and our community members, we plan to develop a community survey to seek input and feedback from our community on possible names and ideas that they may have for Comprehensive High School number 2. Next thing I wanted to share with you is this is our vision, our values, and our highest priority. We shared this at our convocation, and every member of our staff received one of these cards that you see here. This is front and back. It includes our vision, which you know very well, and it also includes our most important goal. Every student grows academically every year. And we thought it'd be a great idea for every staff member to have that card, to be able to keep that with them throughout the year. And it also includes an opportunity for them to be able to write their one word. We challenge our folks, our staff, to come up with a one word for the year that really defines what it is that they'll focus in on. My one word this year is every. And that is a reminder for me to focus in on every student, the needs of every child, every staff member, and everyone in our community. And that concludes tonight's superintendent's report.
Anything for Dr. Hollingsworth, Board? Okay. Moving to report B, informational report on WISD Balanced Scorecard Priority 1.2, Safety and Security.
Good evening, Board and Dr. Hollingsworth. I'm going to go through real quick a couple of things on this part, and then I'm going to yield the mic to Mr. Aubenshine and Lieutenant Dickinson to talk about their part. But as you remember, Priority 1.2 is related to everyone kind of knowing what the rules are, knowing what the procedures are, and specifically about safety protocols on our campuses. I've highlighted a few things there in red on 1.2B as far as some specific things that are related to this topic tonight about our monitoring our tips received via tip 411. I can tell you that is in full effect already. We've had a couple of things come in the first 2 days of school, and we are constantly monitoring those. One thing that's not listed there, but it's also something that our folks do is Bloxy, which is a way that our technology folks can monitor things that are being searched and looked up for on our system, and then to help us direct a need or care if we need to. And those are also going right now. To provide required training for all students on campus about district and safety protocols. That is in the progress right now. We provided training on the standard response protocol this summer. Specifically, one area that we make sure that we hit our substitute teachers, because they are in and out of multiple campuses, and they need to know what our standard response protocol is, and that is now built into our sub-training. Every time we have a sub-training, we go over that. And again, our campus and emergency drill schedules, those are now scheduled. They have to be scheduled for the year so that we know when they're going to happen. We know that sometimes things change, like it might be raining or something like that for a day, and so they'll call us and let us know. But for the most part, those drills are scheduled. Mr. Aubenshine and Lieutenant Dickinson are going to talk about the district triennial school safety audit and how that relates to our balanced scorecard. And then one area we've seen on there in the bottom of long-term desired outcomes is we want 90% of our WISD students to report that they feel safe at school. When we looked at our survey data specifically at WHS, we had a fairly low rate of students answering that they strongly agree or agree, at only 34%. Now, through the survey, we had anywhere from 20-some-odd% to 35% of students who answered a neutral response. So I don't necessarily think that we had 66% of our kids not believe they were safe. However, we obviously want to improve upon that rating. And I think part of that is educating our students on all the things that we do every day, and they're going to talk about that in a minute, to keep them safe. So that's kind of a broad overview. If you look there at the top, 96% was our goal for attendance. We didn't meet that. We were about 94%, but as I believe Mr. Calden talked about earlier, we budgeted conservatively on that, and we exceeded what we budgeted for, so that was good, but we're going to continue to hit that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aubenstein and Lieutenant Dickinson.
Board, Dr. Hollingsworth. So I'm just going to kind of more highlight what Dr. Avery just went through with the balanced scorecard. If you look, I kind of listed out what I feel we are doing well. And he mentioned the tips via 411. That tool's been almost invaluable to us. It's an anonymous reporting system. Students as well as the parents can submit that via the website. And we've used that already this school year. We're 3 days into the school year. I believe we've already had 3 tips through this year that have been valuable to us. That we used that all last year. Again, it led us to a lot of situations that needed addressed through anonymous reporting. We also, he mentioned the student survey, and I put that we review and respond appropriately, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more on the next slide, but we take this data serious, right? If the students are telling us something, we need to listen to that, right? They are saying not that they feel unsafe, but they're not saying they feel safe. So we need to move that. And we're going to put something into place to make sure that they understand that. And this doesn't have to be the formal survey. This could be just something as informal as students whispering to a security officer or a SRO of, hey, I don't feel safe going to the bathroom at the high school. What can we do about that? And we've had that situation, and we implemented a solution. And we're trying to make sure that they're being heard in what they're telling us. Because if not, they're going to quit talking to us, right? They're not going to tell us if they think it's falling on deaf ears. And as far as the emergency drills, we're almost proficient with this. This is scheduled out through the year. The campuses do a wonderful job of this. I love it. It gives me the opportunity to actually go and observe these drills and make sure that they're running smoothly, that we don't need to change anything or make any adjustments to what we're doing. I have the schedule for the entire year for each campus, and we're really good at this. We're really, really good at that. Opportunities for improvement on these. We have campus level threat assessment teams. I think we can do a little bit better with educating those teams and making them more prepared to address the threats and assess what we have. They're there, but it just needs a little bit of work, in my opinion, and we're going to get there. We're going to put something into place, and I'm going to make sure that we do. And then, I mentioned this just a second ago about providing the training for the students on the safety protocols. We do a good job of training the staff, and I've gone school to school to school leading up to the start of the school year of training the staff on these safety protocols. But I think where we're missing the mark is with the actual students so that they know everything that we've put into place to keep them safe. And I don't think that they feel unsafe in school. I just don't think they know all that we are doing to make them safe. Because the schools are safe. I will tell you right now, the schools are safe. And for them to say, I don't feel safe, even just a small percentage, 35% said they didn't, even that small percentage is too big for me, right? We've got to change that and make them know what we're doing to make them safe. So in line with that, I just wanted to highlight something else that we did towards the end of summer. We did some training because we're always trying to stay prepared. What could be next? This is your security officers doing some tourniquet training. In the event that somebody has some kind of wound that needs to be tourniqueted, here we are. We're teaching, we're learning. They carry these all the time. Every security officer, every SRO has a tourniquet on them at all times in the event they have to use them. And we just refresh. They know how to use them, but we got to refresh and make sure. In addition to that, we did some active shooter response training with the SROs and our school marshals. Those are our frontline defense. That is going to be who's going to address a threat, and we need to know what each other's doing efficiently. You see, I'm not going to give you a lot of the tactics of what we're doing, but you can see that we're addressing the threat, and we're training for it. We're preparing for it. One more picture there, and you can see some actors that one's down. If you can see the red on the leg of the actor to your right, that's supposed to indicate a wound. So from this, we use the security officers who we just taught how to use tourniquets. We incorporate them with the marshals and the SROs as we're training for a full scale, hey, here's somebody who's hurt, now tourniquet them, fix them. and let's continue to train to make the schools safer. And that was the goal here. I just wanted to show you those pictures to show you kind of what we're doing. And I think this is more, we can't show a lot of this to the students. We can show some of it and explain to them, here's what we're doing. We're working for you to make you feel safe. Thank you.
So just to address some of our next steps going forward, we've had a comprehensive multi-hazard emergency operations plan for many, many years. And we overhauled that plan in 2016 with the work of the crisis management team and the Board of Trustees. Our plan has been continuously approved each year by the School Safety Center. But in the wake of the Uvalde shooting, the School Safety Center, under the direction of the governor, took a more hands-on approach to reviewing every school's plan. Because it's so comprehensive, they have 1,100 school districts to analyze. They're wanting more uniformity in those plans. Fortunately, the substance of our plan is good and sound, and we already have the plan in the hands of all of the principals, in the hands of all the campuses to begin the school year. The only change we made at the beginning of the school year was to address the portable buildings that we have at Simpson Elementary for the first time in several years. But we've got a good comprehensive plan to enter the school year. The School Safety Center has instructed us that they want to see the districts slim down some of the verbiage of their plan, and they don't have the ability to look at every school district's plan individually. So if you don't give them the form they're looking for, they're likely to reject it and send it back to you. Thus, there's some work that we need to do to slim down our plan. The School Safety Center published their guidelines in August, August 1. Region 10 has done trainings. We've analyzed what they're looking for. Without changing the substance of our plan, without making a Herculean change on our principles, we're going to be able to provide them a plan that will pass their muster and address some of the things they'll be looking for this year, such as the handling of hazardous materials and situations involving severe weather. That will require action, though, by the crisis management team on September 6th, and then the board at the September meeting, the regular meeting on September 11th, to approve a new plan that we can then send to the School Safety Center later during the month of September. And again, it won't change for our campuses what they do, but it will have a new look that shouldn't have any trouble passing the expectations of the School Safety Center. In addition to those expectations, the legislature this year approved House Bill 3 to comprehensively address school safety. One of the primary areas addressed within House Bill 3 is a requirement for armed security to be at every campus throughout the state. Fortunately, Waxahachie ISD was ahead of this curve, long ahead of this curve. In 2018, the school board approved the Marshall Program, and through the Marshall Program, we have had armed security at every campus throughout the district. In addition to that, through the SRO program with the city, we have the lieutenant to lead our program, and we have peace officers at our high school and all of our junior highs. The definition within House Bill 3 of armed security is actually a peace officer. The overwhelming majority of districts throughout the state are not funding peace officers to serve at every single elementary school. Here in Waxahachie, we will have a rotation with our SROs and their feeder elementaries to go check on the elementaries regularly. And because of the commitment of the Board of Trustees, we already have armed security. We have school marshals at each of those campuses. So that's already the plan. It's been the plan, and it's a good plan, and it's kept the district safe. But at your meeting in September, we will approve a resolution that addresses what we do, addresses what we take care of, and it will be our resolution to then comply with the expectation of House Bill 3. Do you have any questions for Lieutenant Dickinson or me or Dr. Avery?
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, moving on, our report at C, be first review of Board Policy Update 121 with proposed changes affecting Waxahachie ISD local policies CFB, CKE, CLB, CRE, CVA, DEA, FD, and FFI in consideration of additional proposed changes to Waxahachie ISD local policies DEC and EIC. Mr. Lee. That's a lot of,
Thank you, Mr.
a
President.
lot of word, a lot of letters in there.
I apologize for the tongue twister, but simply, this is your first opportunity to review the proposed changes in Update 121. And most of these changes are largely formulaic. They're not very substantive. In fact, many of them just allow for more references within the policy themselves, so adding cross-references to some of the policies. In addition, CVA local and CVB local address something that's throughout all of the local policies, and that is the superintendent's delegation authority. And so there are many, many policies that used to say superintendent and/or designee. Well, the superintendent is the only employee that you, the board, directly supervise. Then the superintendent, you charge to make sure that your policies are enforced. The superintendent and his 1,600 employees are the ones then that are charged to do as you've instructed. But it's the superintendent who has that power to designate and delegate. One policy, BJA local, spells this out clearly. So anytime you see the superintendent referenced in board policy, the superintendent shall, the superintendent will, it's implied that it's the superintendent or whoever the superintendent has designated. There were a lot of redundant references to those designations, and TASB, as they've arisen, as they've reviewed their policy, they're recommending changes. And so that's a lot of what this is. Like I said, it's formulaic changes. Update 122, which will be coming to us in October, is going to address all of the things the legislature did during this past session. So we'll be bringing what we've been informed or what we've been told to anticipate, about 120 changes to address what the legislature did later this fall. But that's fortunately not this update, and you're not required to take any action tonight. This is just your first opportunity to review. Because we want some of these things in place by the start of the school year, or I'm sorry, by September 1, we're going to ask that these be approved at your special meeting where you address the budget on August 28th. We do want to take this opportunity to go ahead and tweak 2 additional local policies. So in addition to Update 121, we are asking for some slight modifications to DEC local and EIC local. In DEC local, we're just wanting to bring our paid offset in relation to workers' comp in line with the rest of the school districts in Ellis County. We've been an outlier. We're just bringing it in line to the rest of the districts here. And we want to increase our opportunities for folks to obtain the retirement benefit that's expressed in DEC. Right now, an employee, after they've served at least 15 years with us in their year of retirement, would have to give us 90 days notice before the last day of the school year. But a TRS retiree can retire either in the last day of the school year, or if they're campus-based, they could retire on that last day of the fall semester. We want to give them the opportunity to retire on that last day of the fall semester and still get this opportunity. And if they're not campus-based, just give us 90 days notice. So if they're support services, transportation, you name it, give us 90 days notice with 15 years of service and the attendance in their last few years, and they'll be eligible to receive this benefit. And so we're asking the board to make that approval on August 28th and address EIC local to help us in the event we have a tie for valedictorian, give us another tool. The board will recall this past May, we had a tie at WHS. It's rare, but we believe going to the 100-point scale, generally speaking, we live within the GPA scale, the 4-point, 5-point, 6-point scale, but to let us use the 100-point scale, and we couldn't do that this past spring and spring it on our students, but with it in policy, we'd be able to apply the 100-point scale as an additional tie break in the event you have 2 just phenomenal students that have 6.0 each. This would give us the ability to help break a tie so that we could have 1 true valedictorian.
Questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, our next item would be Report D, Informational Report on the 2023-2024 Grading Guidelines Progress Report report card dates, and UIL eligibility dates as presented. Dr. Avery?
Yes, my part of this is just to talk about grading guidelines, the other part you have, I believe. So, we got together a few weeks ago with our secondary principals and several secondary teachers. I have a couple of them with me tonight. Ms. Watson from Howard, Ms. Fennell from Findlay, and they were a part of our committee. We got together and discussed some changes to our secondary grading guidelines. This was an opportunity for us to make sure that we provided results from the things that we learned through our rounding sessions last year. We heard several times and through staff surveys that we needed to tweak some grading guidelines, and so that's why we got together and did this. The first major substantive change we've made is that there was a requirement for teachers to have had at least one major grade or test before the 3-week progress report. According to our teachers, that was very difficult to do, particularly because units don't necessarily always end prior to 3 weeks. Mostly they're built around there, but not always. And so it was very difficult. Sometimes they felt like they were forcing one in that really didn't need to be at that time. And so that requirement was removed. Also, under the heading of unit tests and pre-AP, AP learning checkpoints, we changed the phrase from retest, we changed it to retest must be offered versus permitted. I mean, there was some confusion there about whether a retest had to happen or not. One of the things also that we found as a parent, I have found this to be very, very helpful, and I think other parents do too. I don't think I'm particularly different than other folks, but teachers are now required to send a weekly grade report regardless of whether a student's grade is passing or not. And I, wouldn't mind if somebody were to talk about how easy that is to do, because that was a question of mine is, well, how hard is that?
It's a couple button clicks. You go in Skyward and you just have to click a few buttons. It's really easy. I had Tatum Averett, so he got one every week. I had Clay for like a week, so you probably only got one until he got moved into IPC, but it's incredibly easy. Takes 5 minutes.
We thought that was a way that even if the student is not failing, if there's a missing paper or something like that that parents can pay attention to, if they get that grade report every Friday, it'll help them manage, and it helps the teacher too, because parents can be a partner. Also, we talked about the guidelines for late or missing work, and we modified that. This was an area that did cause some consternation. For last year, we had allowed a missing assignment to be turned in up to 5 days prior to the end of the grading period, and so we have modified that significantly, basically back to where we were. So for middle schools, late work will be accepted for a maximum grade of 70, so there is a penalty, a significant penalty, of course, for maximum grade of 70 up to 5 class periods from the due date of the assignment. Okay, 5 class periods. A week was a little bit confusing. It might have been a 4-day week or over the weekend, so we went 5 class periods. And this is a little bit more complicated for high schools because they're on a block schedule. So for high schools, late work will be accepted for a maximum grade of 70 up to 3 scheduled block periods from the due date of the assignment. Think about a block schedule week where you have 3 classes. That might be a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, an A-day week or a B-day week. Could be Tuesday, Thursday that week, so it'd be Tuesday, Thursday, Monday. So up to 3 blocks late. So we did make that modification for that. Also, we made some clarification on the number of days provided for students to make up work due to absences. That was basically a day for every day they were absent. And another thing we also added was to allow teachers to record a 0 as a placeholder for missing assignments. And you want to talk about how that helps?
Yeah, so when a student is absent and if you don't put a grade in at all, sometimes they don't even realize that their grade is going to drop drastically when we do fill those grades in with zeros. And so it just takes a little training sometimes on the parents that you just tell them that when you do put a 0 in, they still can make that up for full credit because they were absent. But if they don't turn it in, this is going to be their grade. And it really gets their attention, but it's not a problem when they turn in for full credit. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we just felt like that would help kind of keep people on track, and they're going to get a grade report every Friday now, so that helps them even more. And the other thing that we added was the WHS final exam exemption guidelines. We added at the end of this document, and we did make a change to that. In the past, for the past several years, we have not included attendance as an incentive for exam exemptions. Obviously, we took that out when we were dealing with COVID, and we didn't want to send the wrong message. Come to school even if you feel bad, so you can be exempt from your final. Okay, so we do believe we're over that hump, and so we have added that back into our exam exemption policy. It's staggered. Freshmen and sophomores can have fewer than juniors and then seniors. So those are the changes that we've made. I'm hoping I'm here to answer any questions that you have, or Ms. Fennell or Ms. Watson can answer any questions about our process or how that worked.
Dr. Averett, I read through the policy. It looks great as far as I can tell. But I had a question. This says for WHS only.
Correct.
So what about global?
Global does not have an exemption policy specifically related to their dual credit classes. Those college classes are going to give an exam. We can't exempt them from it.
Okay.
So, yeah. Thank you for that question. That's what I had to.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Averett. Okay, moving on to report E would be our informational report on WISD Transportation Department. Mr. Marippa.
Good evening, Dr. Hollingsworth, board members. I'm Christian Grippa, the Director of Transportation, and I'm here to present some of the information that we have for transportation. Waxahachie ISD has done a really good job of pushing forward for this balanced scorecard. I want to talk about some of the data that transportation is seeing to make sure that we are on board and pushing forward with the safety of our students in every way that we can, including our transportation side. And so one of the things that I love is data. I know I'm a little different in that area, but data is what tells us why we're great, tells us where we need to improve, and so it's something that I believe very highly in keeping. And so when I was hired in February, we started keeping some data for the department, and so I'll talk about that here in a second, but kind of the state of where transportation is currently. You can see the routes that we have scheduled in elementary, junior high, and high school, how many sped routes we have. We're at about 55 regular buses. We are at 12 sped buses, and then we have a white fleet across the district as well. Transportation is responsible for maintaining all of those. And we try to do the best we can. Our shop guys are awesome, and they're working nonstop all the time to make sure all of our fleet and vehicles are on the street out there doing what we need to do. And so that's kind of the state that we're in with our vehicles currently. When I collect data, we always want a baseline. And so if it's grayed out, like this slide right here, we are still collecting a baseline. We got to find out where we are to find out the goals we want to achieve. So these slides that are grayed out, we are collecting those, that baseline data. But you can see as far as it comes to at-fault accidents, where we are at fault. We have months that are great and none, and we have months that we hit a few. We take numbers like you can see in May, we were at 5, and that is no more than, going back and refreshing how we look at our mirrors and make sure we're backing up correctly and not hitting an awning that we shouldn't have hit, and make sure that we are always on top of our safety and the way that we're doing things. So each slide is something that we are keeping data on. So that's accidents, CDL training graduates. We are trying to keep up with the need of drivers, and the best way that we have found to do that is to train our own. Get them CDL certified, get them hired on, let them become bus drivers, and then they are a part of what we do. So we're keeping how many we get through our system. Student referrals. This is what our drivers cannot necessarily take care of themselves. If they have to get help from a campus, an administrator, some sort of punishment needs to be is more than just, hey, change your seats because you're doing this or that wrong. Drivers write a referral up, and we keep track of how many are coming in. And it's grayed out. These first few are grayed out because we are collecting that baseline data, where are we currently, so that we can achieve a goal of where we want to be. This is unusable buses. So you saw the numbers of the fleet that we have. Well, each month we have unusable buses. Maybe they are broken down, the engine is broken down, maybe there's a light that needs to be fixed before we can get down the road, but for whatever reason, we have buses that we can't use. So this kind of charts where we are. April is the one that I have kind of showed up there on the top. Because I know where the state is percentage-wise of what we want, I know that this is not a good number for us. And it just kind of shows where we are as a fleet. We got buses that are breaking down that need to have time to be fixed. In April, 32.83% of our fleet at some point was unusable. And that comes out to about 22 of our buses. That affects everything. That affects how hard the shop works, that affects our routes, that affects everything that we do. So we obviously want that number to a more appropriate place. And there are certain things that we gotta pick up to make sure that we can do that. Buses older than 15 years or 150,000 miles, that is about average for the time you wanna look at a new bus. 25 or 37.31% of our bus are right around that point, or are at that point. They either have 15 years of age or 150,000 miles. Now that's not awful. We're near what a goal of a district would want to be. The goal is about 12 to 18. We're at 25. So we still got some improvement to make, but not too far off. Again, one that's we're getting baseline data on is monthly service calls. This is how many times our shop is called out to fix something that is on the road. And so because our shop is in such a great place with what they are doing, we aren't going out to fix something broken down with our kids on the side of the road, which is what we do not want to have to do. And so you can see we try to get the preventive maintenance done. We try to make sure our buses are the best they can be, so we're not having a bus full of kids on the side of the road. So you can kind of see where we are there. Monthly jobs completed. This is just, if our shop gets their hands on something, they're fixing something, this is what that number is. And you can see our shop is busy every day, beginning to end. They are getting after it, and they do a fantastic job. But again, baseline data so we know where we are, see where our goals want to be. Field trips, we just started collecting that data at the end of last year. You can see how much it decreases. Well, that's at the end of the year. As I start collecting this data month to month, start this year, that number is going way up. Our field trips are going drastically higher to start a year right now. Sports, UIL, all kinds of stuff. So they're going to be much higher than they were at the end of the year last year. These last two slides are really about the state of how many hired drivers we have, because this shows how often mechanics have to drive. So if we are not fully staffed, if we have lots of call-ins and we can't have our drivers in, we have other people pulling that duty. This is our shop. So this is how often mechanics have to drive. This is actually really good. Waxahachie ISD is in a great state with their mechanics because our mechanics are in the shop doing their job. That is not the case everywhere, okay? And so, back in September when we had 6 hours, that's basically a mechanic out of the shop doing a full-time job driving routes. By the end of the year, they're getting just a little bit of time, which is absolutely acceptable. We can live with that. It's what a goal would be. So we're very excited that our shop is doing shop work and not having to drive routes. However, our office staff, it did get so much better at the end of the year. When I got hired on, one of my main goals is let's get as fully staffed as we can. I think that's everybody's goal across the state. We were lucky and fortunate to get some really good hires on at the end of the year, so they were driving routes. But before that, you can see the red and the yellow on the scale there. We got probably 3 full-time employees out driving routes, which means somebody's calling transportation, my kid's not home yet, and they're having to call 2 or 3 times because the person that's answering the phone is out on a route. Or all the office staff except for 1 or 2 is out on a route, so they're trying to handle all the calls and it's just getting clogged up. When we have 5.5 hours as our average route, when we're at 16, when we're at 18, we got 3 full-time employees out driving routes that should be in the office not doing their job. But like I said, again, last year, to begin this year, we were very proud to say that it's going in the right direction where we don't have to look at yellow and red numbers, which we don't want. We want them doing their job. That is all I have. Do you guys have any questions for transportation?
Any questions? Comments? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving along to report F, be the informational monthly project management report. Mr. Mott?
I got to refresh, guys. Sorry for the interruption. You're on slide 85.
All good? Good evening, Board. Dr. Hollingsworth. I'm Stephen Mott. I'm going to give you a construction update for the bond 2023. We've also got Bob Myers here with AGCM to help with this. We're going to talk about Proposition A first. So far in Saddlebrook, we are on time and on budget. Right now going on at the site, if you were to go out there, you're going to see a lot of things going on that it really shows that we're doing a lot out there, and it's really coming along very fast. We're having the utilities are being dug from the street to the school. We actually had some large inspections today for that. We have the MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, digging for the storm shelter. We also have grade beams and spot footers being dug in the area A. This last week, we did have our first pour out there, so we poured the shelter footing beams out there, and you'll see some pictures of that here in just a minute. So here's a picture of the site as we started in June 16th. That was before the groundbreaking ceremony. And you can see July 10th, where we're doing it in the middle of dirt compaction. You can see August 1st. You can see those are some drone footage from the exact same spot. One thing I do want to point out to you is, if you'll see in that August 1st, you can see up there at the top behind the construction trailer in the white gravel areas there. You can see that is dirt. If you look back in the July 10th and the June 16th pictures, that was grass and trees. That is the next phase for Saddlebrook. They are moving very fast now that they know there's going to be a school there. So they are moving on their side quickly. Here's just some more pictures. Here is, again, that is the site. The brown is where that is a completed pad. And then you'll see the drive lanes there in the front and the back. Those are actually where the driveways will be in the parking areas and those kind of things. The two white gravel areas are the playground areas that you see there. The picture on the right is actually utilities in the front one, and that is MEP in the back digging. So we have two of them digging almost in the same area at the same time there. Then we have the first pour. So that was last Tuesday, I believe it was. Kind of exciting to have the first pour there. Everybody drives by and says, hey, they really are doing something here. They're not just playing in the dirt. That was 23 different concrete trucks for one day, started about 7:30, finished about mid-morning. Now we're going to move to Wildman Steam. Later tonight, we're going to be voting on the GMP, which is gross maximum price for that building. After that, the timelines will be generated. We'll have a lot better knowing for sure of a lot more timelines on that. They have done the preliminary work for some, but after tonight, they'll make them a lot more set in stone, per se. We are shooting for a partial occupancy in August 24. Now, I will say that's tentative. I don't feel real confident. We don't feel real confident in that. There is a lot of things on this site that are going to do that. So we are working on some plans on the backside. Dr. Hollingsworth, Ryan, Ms. Mott, and I are all looking at some different options to how we're going to make everything work in August of '24 to make all the pieces work like we need to work.
Thank you, Stephen. I want to add to that, to the board. You know, we feel much more confident with Hancock and the ability of us to be able to partially occupy that building earlier than we do currently about Wyoming Steam. But that does not mean we have abandoned our plan to be able to provide that relief to WHS. And so we're going to do everything we can creatively to be able to make that happen. But we'll keep you all abreast of changes as we move forward.
So that does mean that 10 is still on pace to be open and will be open by August of '24. It's just the Steam will not be at that time. The Hancock building conversion, plans will be completed mid-September. We do feel that very strongly in a partial occupancy in August of '24. What that means for that building is we have to have a band hall area built in the front section to occupy that and bring Coleman across the street. It'll hold them as they are today. And then during the school year, we will continue to build the rest of the classrooms and those kind of things we're going to be doing on all that. But we can move over to the current building as long as we have that band hall area. Prop B, which is a comprehensive high school number 2. The trustees have last month, or actually 2 months ago in June, they toured Burleson Centennial High School. And later this month, we will be touring Eagle Mountain High School. And those are pictures of the 2 schools you can see there in the bottom. Prop C. So that is the current building facility upgrades we're doing there. So far, we've completed awnings at this last month. We completed awnings at Dunaway and Shackelford Elementary. We've finished the flooring in the classrooms and hallways at Finley Junior High. Now, that did not include the red brick area, because that area will be being addressed during the renovation, so there was no sense in doing that, go ahead and doing that now and just damaging it again and working on it later. We did do some locker room replacements in the Finley girls' locker room. We did some at the Finley field house and some tiling of the walls and shower floors. The Wedgeworth gym, we refloored it into a spongy type floors with sport court versus the old VCT. We've been doing that in all elementary gyms as we have redone their full school. We've replaced the doors at the Finley Fieldhouse, and we finished a partial overlay at Clift, Felty, and Howard in the month of July as well. So here's some pictures of Finley Junior High. The picture on the top left is a current classroom. The picture on the bottom left, it was a past classroom. Now, the one thing about those classrooms are they weren't all the same. We had some of them that had solid green with white spots. You had some that had different patterns in them, so it was a variety of classrooms. Now they all have uniformity of all being white. The picture in the top right is a current hallway today, the new hallway. The picture on the bottom right was the exact same hallway, the same picture. And then the upper in the middle there in the section, that's just another hallway. But all of them went to that pattern on the right there. Here's a picture of the Wedgeworth gym, the Dunaway awning next to the gym, and then the Shackelford awning across the front of the school. We're currently working on right now is some fencing on the back and side of the playground area at Clift, and some flooring in the field house at the Finley Junior High. Later tonight, we have quite a few items in front of the board to be approved. It's going to be some playground items, some AC updates, some new doors, some badge reader door handles. We're going to be going to a new door handle that the teachers will use their IDs instead of a key. So we won't have to issue keys to every teacher in the district on those campuses as we move forward. All of our new campuses will have that, and we will retrofit all the old campuses to the same way as we move forward. Some full new roof overlays and an HVAC control system. So that gives us EMS controls for that. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to turn over to Ryan Calden for sale of the bond.
Board, just want to give you a quick update on the sale of the first part of the bonds. You may remember our plan includes $200 million of new money this year, 200 million next year, and 175 million in 2025 as it lines up with the various projects under Propositions A, B, and C. So back in June, Doug Witt was here and talked to you about setting the parameters for the sale of these bonds, and the final maturity was not to be more than 30 years, and we were to retire Proposition C principal in 10 years or less to make sure that that principal was not exceeding the life of those Proposition C projects. And the interest cost at that time, the ceiling cap was 4.75%. These bonds priced in early July, and the true interest cost to taxpayers was 4.21%. And so having met all of the parameters of that you had established in June on these bonds, they did fund and close last Wednesday. And so we have received our deposit of $200 million at that point, and we will continue work on those projects as we go forward.
Any questions for Mr. Collin? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mott. Okay, moving on to report G, our informational quarterly demographics update.
Board, I'm going to introduce Trent Smith from Zonda Education. He's going to come give you the quarterly demographic report. As you remember, starting this past year in September, we went to a quarterly demographic report instead of an annual to help us better align with our growth. So Mr. Smith will give us that update from the second quarter of 2023.
Good evening, President Autry, members of the board, Dr. Hollingsworth. Thank you for having me tonight. As Ryan mentioned, I will be going through the demographic report today, and we'll jump right in. You guys have, this is a fire hose information session for you guys tonight, so why not continue that? So we'll start with the economy. The unemployment continues to be right there around 4%, and it has kind of stayed right around there. But I know if you go down to any of the streets here in Waxahachie, any of the convenience stores, any restaurants, everybody's got a help wanted sign. So there's still some resistance about getting back into the workforce right now, but it is good news to have that down in those sub fours at times, and then coming out of the summer session, I expect that to go back up a little bit as well. So looking at all the things that have happened, considering in the housing market specifically, looking at the interest rates and how that has changed the housing market over the last 6 months and really the last year overall. But granted that there has been a drop in the amount of activity in the housing market, DFW is still #1 in the nation as far as quarter starts. And you can see that Texas has 4 of the top 10 markets in the country as far as number of starts go. So Texas is still rolling along very well, but you can see all of those different places that we've highlighted there. They all have a little bit lower starts than they had the previous year, but all still at the very top of the list across the country. And so ranked first in terms of starts volume, ranked, and then you can see there are 21 out of the 25 markets actually had a decline in total number of starts. So what that looked like specifically to DFW, you can see we had, starting back toward the end of 2022 and all through 2023 so far, we've had a little bit of drop in the number of starts each quarter, starting, back in the third quarter of 2022. And because of that, we've seen a little bit of slowdown, obviously, in that market. But you can see that we had such a huge number of starts during the pandemic and not near as many closes. And so you can see that gap that was there. That's the signal of a less healthy market. I'm not going to say unhealthy because, as you can see from the slide before, Texas is pretty insulated as far as the major swings across the country. But you can see that definitely we had a lot more starts than we were having closes during that time. And so really what we're seeing is an adjustment. And so the interest rates have come down, have also helped that along. And you can see we've dropped down the number of starts, but we have kind of leveled off. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on in the presentation. But overall housing sales across the DFW market, we're still trailing. I mean, when you look at the year of 2021, it was a banner year all the way through in housing sales. And when, last year you can see that teal kind of color bar there on that top graph. That is all of 2022. And then as we go through this year, we're kind of trailing still a little bit of where we were last year. But overall, still a very strong market. You can see we do have more listings than we had. Month's inventory is up. But still, to give you a little bit of perspective, month's inventory at what we would have called a normal market back before COVID was about 4.5 months supply. So we're still not quite where we want to be. Demand is still outreaching supply overall. And so some of the things that we do is, one of the things that we do is we survey presidents of building corporations or development companies across the country to kind of get a feel for what's going on in the sales market right now because of the definite volatility of the interest rates. What is happening out there? Well, this is a survey that we put together. The number one reason, because we are seeing not near as many existing homes in the market available right now. And you can imagine if you're sitting at your house right now at that 3% interest rate, you're probably not interested in moving out into a different home right now because you don't want to go up to 7% interest. And so there's a lot of existing homes that are sitting on their houses who probably would have either moved up into a different house or moved out into a different area, but they just can't give up 3% interest. And so that's what's happening in the existing home. So you can see lack of resale supply has spurred the new housing market. And then you can see the other issues that are there, marriage, having children, sick of paying rent, relocating. Those are all the number one reasons why people are buying these new homes. So those are these, as life happens, this is what we call life happens type of events that are driving that new home market. And when we look at what is the land acquisition strategy of these presidents of these companies moving forward, you can see 95% are saying that we're going to move forward either cautiously or full steam ahead in land purchasing to expand our new home development as we move into the rest of 2023 and into 2024. And then when you look at, what is, as far as number of starts, what are they expecting to see this year? Well, you can see that almost 70% total, if you total up those top three, are expecting number of starts to be higher than they were last year. And so when you look at, you've got almost a little over 30% that are looking at that they're definitely expecting 10% or more raise in the number of starts in the year, the rest of this year through 2024. And so how does that look here in Waxahachie? And actually, that last graph didn't come through in this conversion. But you can see these interest rates did really slow down here, some things in Waxahachie. But you can see we're starting to pick up a little bit. Had another 158 starts in the second quarter. So we are kind of getting a little bit momentum back. And then you can see we had 201 closes in the second quarter of this year. And so both of those things are positive moves in the right direction. And one of the things, we're seeing this across the DFW market where we see, first and second quarter we're down quite a bit in starts, but we are seeing some other things in our preparation for what's coming down the pipe, right? So when you look at this particular table, this is showing you going through kind of breaking down by elementary zone what's happening inside of each one. You see annual starts, quarter starts, annual closings, quarter closings. And the Simpson is highlighted in yellow. All those numbers are in yellow. That's your most active elementary zone. And so it had 193 starts and 232 closes in the 12-month period from third quarter through second quarter of 23. And you can see, number 2 is Clift up there with 212 closes, so not far behind there. And then number 3 is Wedgeworth with starting to get some traction there as well. But what do you see about Wedgeworth is you've got almost 9,700 futures inside Wedgeworth right now. And then second is there at Clift with 6,900. So almost 7,000 in there in Clift as well. And so here's the overview map showing you kind of where the activity is happening right now inside the district. A lot of activity happening inside Waxahachie ISD. 41 active subdivisions right now inside the district and 24 future subdivisions that have not started yet. And so of these, there's groundwork on another 1,200 lots. So we have 2,000 lots in inventory right now that are ready to build on. Now we're going to add another 1,200 over the next 12 to 18 months. And so lots of things happening. You see all of those areas that are outlined in red. That means that they've got groundwork underway right now, going from, raw land into developed lots. We're going to take a look at a couple of subdivisions. I'm going to keep it pretty short. So Myrtle Creek, part of what used to be all of Saddlebrook, 2,500 future lots there. The PID was approved, or the approval is pending. So they've got a rough start already down there with some grading going on. Anticipate the first lots being delivered in the fall of 2024, and they expect to build about 200 homes a year once they get going. And that includes the 24 acres of multifamily and 8 acres of duplexes. And you can see that satellite image, you can see that rough, groundwork already starting there in July of this year. And then we kind of zoomed in on this area around Ridge Crossing, Dominion Park, and Shepherd's Place. Lots of activity happening there. Ridge Crossing groundwork is almost complete on those 265 lots there. And or the first part of that, first part of that. You can see on the right there, the satellite image from July showing you the progress that they've made. So those are getting close to complete to start building homes there and anticipate building some homes this fall. Shepherd's Place, 263 total lots there with 78 futures remaining, 46 vacant developed lots, 15 homes under construction, and already 115 homes occupied there. And groundwork is underway on those final lots there inside that final 78 lots. Then you've got Dominion Park there with 206 total futures with the plat approved in May of this year, and early groundwork is already underway there as well. You also have some multifamily coming in. You can see you've got 830 units right now under construction. 175 of those are senior living, and so those won't have much of an effect on the district. And then you've got another 3,800 total units down in the pipeline at some point in the future. And so taking all of those things into consideration, we look at your 10-year forecast. Last year you grew 703 kids. And so I want to remind you that even though school's about to start, this is last year's, the orange is last year's enrollment numbers. And as of snapshot, so we based everything on the last Friday of October. So all of these numbers reflect that point of time. So we're always comparing apples to apples. And so we're expecting you guys to be at 11,145 by the time you reach the last Friday in October of this year. And so that's another gain of 350 kids. It did slow, we slowed you down about half what you did last year because of the way the housing market has been going. But we are expecting that to kind of turn around the following year, hit another 625 kids that year, and then you're going to be bouncing around that 600 number and then start growing about 700 kids a year starting 5 years out. All right. So then looking at the campus level, you can see, I'm just going to highlight a few of these. You can see, Cliff there at 538 hitting over 600 next year, or this I should say this year. 680 the next year, getting up to 1,000 kids in that area by 2028. Obviously, that's why we have the new school opening next year. Then you've got, at Northside, they're going to bounce around right at capacity. It's going to be a really very good utilization there. When you look at Simpson's going to hit 750 in 2024, get up to over 950 in 2026, hit 1,000 in 2028. And then at Wedgeworth, you've got 840 there. We mentioned the number of futures there. As those start to come to fruition later on, you're going to hit 1,000 kids there at 2027. And by the time you hit 2031, it's going to be over 1,500. At the junior highs, you guys are in great shape there as far as capacities go. And then at the high school, this year we're expecting to have about 3,150 kids, and then another 3,300 in 2024, and then get up to over 3,400 by 2026, hitting 3,500 next year, hitting about 4,000 kids out in 29-30. So overall, enrollment is starting to rebound finally from COVID. We did peak up over that, 50 to 60,000 growth last year, which was we're finally just past pre-pandemic levels. And after losing about 170,000 kids to COVID, we do expect, you guys are adding another 2,300 students over the last 5 years and nearly 750 last fall. We do expect that starts to turn around, and they have been sliding. We are expecting that number to kind of start turning back the other direction. And then annual new homes, as those have been pulled back, we do expect that inventory to be sold out pretty quickly. So that's why you're starting to see all this activity with groundwork in all these different locations. You do have groundwork underway on another 1,200 lots to add to the 2,000 you already have. So we are expecting you to be at over 13,500 students in 27-28 and over 17,300 in 32-33. I went really fast. I was stumbling. I was talking so fast.
Well, just to give you all some today's numbers, y'all know Friday we ended, and this is with no shows taken out, Friday we ended at 10,776. Today, that was Friday. Today, we ended at 10,924. Allison Mendelson told me that we have about 14 more showing up tomorrow. So tomorrow, we should have 10,938. So we're just right on the edge of that 11,000 mark. Ms. Harris reported that they ended the day today with 3,146, which is up 47 since Friday.
Any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Trent.
All right, final report by informational semi-annual ESSER 3 update. Mr. Calden?
Thanks, sir. Board, anytime we take federal money, we have strings that are attached, and this one is that you get a semi-annual update of where we are. So we'll quickly go through. Our ESSER 3 spending plan has not changed from the original $8.9 million that we were allotted. It's $4.2 million for student learning loss, $600,000 for student mental health, $1.6 million for staff retention, and $2.5 million for technology. Through the end of July, we have spent roughly $2.8 million on student learning loss through instructional materials and tutors and tutoring. We spent approximately $500,000 on student mental health, $1.3 million on staff retention, $460,000 on professional development, which would also go towards the student learning loss, and then $2 million on technology expansion. To date, we've spent about $7.2 million of our $8.852 million allotment, or 81.47%. Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Calden? I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
There's not a lot to it. It's just you're required to get an update. Here's your update.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that concludes our report portion of the agenda. We'll move into item 8, was our consent agenda. We have a lengthy consent agenda, items A through N.
Mr. President, I do know that Mr. Calden had one additional item to provide to the board for that consent, item B.
Board, the item that was passed out is a request for a replacement of an air conditioning unit that is above the culinary arts area at Waxahachie High School. It's a unit that unfortunately has gone out. It's a 30-ton unit, so it's expensive and it's large. We're looking at about a 14-week lead time for a replacement on that unit. So we are going to be looking at renting some equipment between now and then to keep it an operating, comfortable classroom for our students over there, but it is a $91,750 replacement on that unit.
I was just curious, the units needing replacement, was there no chance of it being repaired?
So when I asked our maintenance team to look into it, the response that I got was, we can get a quote on it if you would like, but this is a unit that we've had some issues with in the past, and last time we got a repair quote, there wasn't a significant margin between replace and repair. And so I asked them to pursue the replace cost and not the repair cost. So it is a different, the unit that was put up there is a different manufacturer than the one that we typically like to work with. And so it's not, it wouldn't be my recommendation to continue with that brand of unit for that reason.
Any other questions or comments from consent agenda items A through N? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve all consent agenda items.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. McCutcheon. Second by Ms. Timmerman. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to our action item, we have action item A, consideration with possible action to approve the recommendation that WISD renew its depository contract with First Financial Bank for a 2-year period with 3 possible 2-year extensions allowable by TEA. Mr. Calden?
Mr. President, you summed it up very well. So depository contract is required by TEA. It is a biannual depository agreement, so it does cover 2 fiscal years. This would start from 23 and go through 25. TEA does allow for 3 biannual extensions. We are currently in a depository contract with First Financial Bank. We mailed out the prescribed TEA forms to every FDIC insured institution within our zip codes. I believe that's 11 or 12 of them. We received 2 responses back, and based off those responses, it's my recommendation that we enter into this contract with First Financial Bank for our depository bank services for the next biennium, with up to 3 biennial extensions.
Questions for Mr. Calden? Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve action item A as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Rogers. Second by Ms. Kriegel. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Very much, sir. Okay, action item B would be consideration with possible action to approve the 2023-2024 WISD hazardous bus routes. Mr. Grippa?
Good evening again. So the state of Texas mandates that we have a 2-mile walk radius to our campuses. There are certain areas that we can transport students through transportation within those 2 miles, but they have to be considered hazardous areas. They can be considered hazardous areas for a few different reasons: construction zones, busy, dangerous streets without adequate crossing and monitors, sidewalk issues that may not be completed to get them to the schools. So you should have before you a list of our hazard zones. There are 15 of them. 14 of them are the same as last year. We did add 1 to it because of a new construction zone that makes it a hazard for those students to get to campus. So we have a total of 15 hazard areas that we are requesting that we are able to transport our kids when they would normally have to walk. Questions on that?
Question on hazardous bus routes? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve action item B as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Starnader. Second by Ms. Kriegel. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, action item C would be consideration with possible action to approve a guaranteed maximum price for the construction of the new Wildman Steam Academy from BTC in the amount of $47,647,045. This says Mr. Calden.
I'm actually going to turn this one over to Mr. Mott, let him walk you through this.
Good evening, Board. Dr. Hollingsworth. I'm here tonight to present to you the gross maximum price for the next step in the 2023 bond for WISD. Due to the collaboration that was done with by the LRPC and the community support in the May 2023, a historic bond for Ellis County was passed. Dr. Hollingsworth has shared that the bond passed for WISD was the largest in Ellis County history. I take great pride in working to make sure that this bond is completed correctly for the voters of Waxahachie ISD. So with that, I would like to bring you the GMP for the new Wildman Steam Academy building. The GMP is $46,637,205. We had, for this gross maximum price, we had 238 bidders. Just to give you, so you kind of know, on elementary 10, we had 260. So we're still seeing quite a few bidders involved in the Waxahachie bids, which is a very good thing to see. It does help us with our pricing. Price per square foot for Wildman Steam is $453 per square foot. Elementary 10 was $391. So our construction budget for Wildman Steam was $46,143,526. So our gross GMP is about $493,000 over what we had estimated as our construction budget. Now, in that $493,000, we did add a walkway over part of the student drop-off, which was about a $230,000 add-in to that. So we do see some possible savings in a couple of different areas throughout the building process that we're still investigating, but and those will be realized later in the process. I do feel confident that we will be on or under budget after looking at all these possible savings. These savings will be credited back or can be used as more money in our owner contingency line in the building process. The savings will be determined when we have the total amount of savings. We will then I'll report back to you as to what we have saved and what we have realized after going through a few more scopes and having a few more people add a couple of options and looking at maybe combining a couple with different things like that. So with that being said, do y'all have any more questions on the GMP for this building?
Questions for Mr. Mott? Okay, at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the guaranteed maximum price for the construction of the new Wildman Steam Academy from BTC in the amount of $46,637,205.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. McCutcheon. Second. By Mr. Starnader. More discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Mott. Okay, moving on to action items. D is consideration with possible action to name a delegate to the Texas Association of School Board, TASB's board delegation.
Mr. President, I would like to nominate Kim Kriegel to be our delegate for this most important meeting.
Any other nominations? Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to accept Kim Kriegel as our delegate to the Texas Association of School Board delegation.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Timmerman,
Second.
second by Mr. McCutcheon. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to action item E, consideration with possible action to approve a nomination for a candidate to serve an unexpired term on the Ellis County Appraisal District Board of Directors. Mr. Collins, do you have something you want to add to this?
Board, we had received notice from Kathy Roderick over at the Appraisal District that there was a board member that has resigned their position, so there's an unexpired term. All districts or all entities within Ellis County have the ability to nominate one individual that they would like to serve that unexpired term. Then the appraisal board, the members of the appraisal board will take all of those nominations, and they will pick one individual to fill the remainder of that term. So this is not a indefinite term. This does have a end life, and with some changes in state law, we'll be looking at nominations for appraisal board membership towards the end of this year, in addition to the members that will be elected at large by the public. But right now, this is for nominations to fill the unexpired term of a board member who resigned.
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we nominate Floyd Bates as a candidate to serve the unexpired term on the Ellis County Appraisal Board of Directors.
Second? Second. So I have a motion by Mrs. Kriegel and a second from Mrs. Starnader that we nominate Floyd Bates as a candidate to serve an unexpired term for the Ellis Central Appraisal District Board of Directors. Any other discussion? All in favor of Mr. Bates, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Okay. Our last action item would be consideration with possible action to delegate contractual authority to obligate the school district under Texas Education Code TEC 11.15111C4 to the superintendent for the 2023-2024 school year solely for the purpose of obligating the district under TEC 48257 and TEC Chapter 49, Subchapters A and D, and the rule adopted by the Commissioner of Education as authorized under TEC 49.006, including approval of the agreement for the purchase of attendance credit netting Chapter 48 funding.
That was a great
You want me to
job.
repeat that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think
You
you
sure?
skipped a word.
Okay.
This was not my idea of a sick joke. TEA wants really specific language in the minutes. So, as we talked earlier, we've received the letter from TEA that they anticipate us to be a property wealthy district and that we will be subject to recapture for next year. Within that, we talked a little bit earlier about we have to make an election of how we're going to reduce our wealth. Your 5 options are consolidate with another district, detach property, purchase attendance credits from the state, contract to educate non-resident students from a partner district, or consolidate tax bases with another district. It'd be my recommendation to you, and I believe the overwhelming choice that most districts in the same situation would make would be to purchase attendance credits from the state, and thus the ridiculously long agenda language that President Autry just read.
Any questions for Mr. Collin? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve action item F as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Timmerman, second by Mr. Rogers. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Okay, our last item will be our comments from our individual board members. I'll take them in no particular order, whoever wants to go first.
I'll start. For those of you that went the other night to our back-to-school bash, oh my, what a great example of how our community and our district went together to make it a very successful event. A big thank you to Jenny and Amy and Joan and Nicole for all your hard work on putting, I can't even imagine the organization that goes into that, but it was absolutely fantastic. So, thank you. Did I say Sandy? Oh my gosh, sorry Sandy. Yes, you were a big part of that.
Next.
Along those same lines, I think it's a really exciting time of the year. As my colleague Dusty said at the football game the other night, it's really good to be back in the school year and seeing faces you haven't seen for a while, and just the overall buzz in the stadium and getting going again, and all that entails, all the work with all our different departments, and so hats off to everybody involved, and looking forward to a great school year.
Okay, and along those lines, I just want to thank everybody who got this school year going. It's a lot of work to get a school year started, and everybody that was involved in all the hiring the bus drivers. I mean, I can't name the maintenance people. I can't name everybody that's involved in having a successful school year. I think we're off to a great start, and I can't wait to see what happens with Waxahachie ISD greatness this year. Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate the city of Waxahachie on opening their new municipal services building named in honor of Chuck Beatty. I got to attend the ceremony, and it was very well attended, even though it was 120 degrees. But it was great. So congratulations to them. And yes, thanks, ditto, the thanks to everyone for such a great start.
I was just going to make a note to thank our friends at HEB for convocation, providing all the food. I know they're going through a lot of stress over there with all that construction, and they just hit it out of the park like always. So for Bruce and his team, just thanks to them.
I'll close this by saying I had the privilege of visiting Waxahachie High School on the first day of school. I don't think I've ever gotten through that traffic line as fast. Walked through the hallway without getting run over. I don't know what changed, but it was a great start at Waxahachie High School. So kudos to you and your staff, Ms. Harris. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
McCutcheon, second by Ms. Kriegel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much.